So continuing this discussion, where we added a property in the priest where the database was already existing and we had an error because the model and the database was not matching. So we enabled a migration mechanism. We also created a migration for it, but we did not yet run the application because I said there is another mechanism required to actually run the migration by itself. So let's see how to do that. So if I come here, now this is our form load application where as soon as the form is loaded, it just calls the setup data. And as usual, we went ahead and we saw that if there was no data here, we went ahead and created the data. But before that, before we even access the database for the first time, we should instruct the application to migrate the database if they are not in sync with each other, that is the model and database. So for that, I need a couple of namespaces. I'll just put them here. So one is the namespace for this migration because I'm planning to use this configuration class. Okay, if you see, this comes from the migrations namespace. And the other one is the system.data.entity itself, which I'm also planning to use it for doing this migration automatically. So we'll come down here, and like I said, before we access the database, we should do the migration. Otherwise, we will still have the same exception. If you try to do anything with the database before making sure it is not migrated, it would definitely throw an exception. So what I'm going to do is just before this using statement here, I'll have this. So what this is doing here, if you see, I'm making use of this initializer object, okay, which is a object of class migrate to latest DB version, which comes from, if you just go to definition, it comes from system.data.entity. So that is where that is why I added this namespace there, and it accepts two arguments. One is our application context, and then the configuration where migrations are held in place. So it accepts two arguments. So this temple context is coming from our own application, and the configuration class is also coming from our own applications. Now there might be a small issue with my namespace conventions, so you might want to correct that. You might want to make sure they are in the same namespace, or if you want, you can first complete the application and then make sure you just rename the namespaces accordingly. For now, we can just do away with this. And yeah, so we created an initializer object. What it does is we pass this initializer object to set initializer method. Now this method is a static method of the database class. And where is the database class coming from? It is coming from, if you see the namespace, system.data.entity. That is why I just went ahead and included this as well. This is a static method. That is why we are just able to access it by class name.method name. By doing this arrangement, we are telling the entity framework that, hey, look, I did not go ahead and use the package manager to update the database. I want you to go ahead and do it yourself and make sure that the model and the database are in sync with each other. Now when I run this application, if everything goes well, I should be able to see that it just behaves and says the application is ready, or if an application throws an error, let's see what that error is, and if there is anything to resolve, we will go ahead and resolve it. So let's run this application once. So it is setting up data, it is seeing if there is anything to be migrated. We'll wait for it to complete it. And it says ready. So now let's go ahead, you can just try to operate it, it's fine. But more importantly, let's take a look at the priests also. Remember, we added the age column here. So let's see if it is reflected in the column. So if you see it is not showing here, that's because we have not yet refreshed it. So let's go ahead and say refresh. And now you have this age property also included. So this is how we migrate the database and make sure that the database and the models are always in sync with each other. And in the next video, I'll also show you how to add one more property and make it nullable, and what this whole idea behind making it nullable is. And that will be the discussion here in the 8th topic, part B.